So we are recording. So you were broken up into groups. You should have conversation around our three inquiries regarding the readings. What's the relevance and significance of Sankofa as it pertains to African history? What impressed you or what stood out to you most about the role of women in ancient African civilization? And then what new revelations or new understandings did you gain from the reading as it pertains to African history? Who would like to start the conversation? Okay, go ahead, Lorianne.
So I'm going to answer question number 3 for what new understanding or revelations did you gain about African history from the reading? I put the lack of adequate scholarly treatment of Black women in Black studies and in the academy as a whole posed both a serious problematic and challenge for Black studies since its inception.
Okay. What are your guys' thoughts on that? On what Laura Ann mentioned? Because correct me if I'm wrong, Lorianne, you're saying that the lack of historical information there are on the role of women cause for Africana studies and Black studies to have a limited scope or limited understanding on the role that African women played in history. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Karen. What do you guys think about that? Do you agree? Disagree? Think otherwise? Again, the purpose of this is to engage. We should have talked about this in your breakout rooms.
I agree.
You agree?
I agree with her statement about the major development in Black studies and how sometimes women lack in like fundamental and serious problematic.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely fundamentally problematic. But let me ask you this: who discussed in their group question number 2, as far as the role of women in African civilization? Anybody have that conversation in their group? Who would like to share what was discussed? Okay. So we can do it this way then. Zaria, what did your group discuss in regards to question number 2?
So unfortunately, we were all a little confused, and we didn't read chapter 3 yet. Sorry, section 3 yet. Okay. We were under the understanding that we had to read it starting today, basically.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then prepare for next week what we read for
Zaria,
section 3.
Not to put anybody on blast, but who else was in your group just so I can know who was under that same impression? So Brianna and anyone, who was the other?
Right. I was in another group, but we thought the same thing too.
My group as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Who read these pages for this week? Okay. Yeah. So you can't have this conversation. It's all good. So we'll reverse engineer this then. I'll give you my notes. We'll have a conversation based on my notes. And then you could use your notes as you go into the reading. So that way you'll be a little bit more informed as to what the reading is talking about. And I'll kind of give you some things to look at. Monet?
Just to clear up, so for next time, we're supposed to read that beforehand, not as homework, because that's how I had understood it.
Yeah, that's my fault, because I think on the assignment for when that discussion is due is not due until Thursday.
Yeah.
So I can understand the confusion on
okay.
that. So we'll do it like this. You don't have to submit those discussion questions until Thursday, right?
Okay.
Come to class with that reading done so we can discuss what the material is. Another benefit of you coming to class already doing the reading is any questions or confusions you have about the reading, you can ask me, and then I could be like, boom, this is how we address that. Okay. Kayla, and then Joanna.
So last week's reading, we're not going to discuss that at all.
Let me see. Let me go back to my notes. And I know while I looked at my notes, and if I had something prepared, I could go into that. But I know Joanna had a question, then Claudia.
Yeah, it was the same question.
Okay. So Were you guys here last week? Because correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we discuss last week's reading in our lecture last week? No.
No, we talked about the first reading, the introduction as a
Oh, shoot. You know
disciple.
what? Y'all right. You're absolutely right. You know what?
So we
I'm
didn't
wrong
talk
for that.
about the last one.
We did talk about education, but it was kind of, it felt like it was just like a little
Like a-
preview to the reading. So that's why I was like, okay, then we're gonna read this next week.
Okay. You know, I might have fucked that up. Just to be honest.
So, yeah, my question kind of spins off of theirs.
Okay.
If we're supposed to have read all the way up, because the one that you said is due Thursday, I see week 3 due Friday, and it's covers up to section 4.2, all the way up to page 107.
Let me look, because I believe, just to keep it 100 with y'all, I have an online class and I have the hybrid class, and I structured them both simultaneously. So this is
Okay.
probably why some of this confusion is taking place. Um,
No problem. We were just like really like, oh, I guess we're the ones that went behind a week.
nah. Teachers fuck up too. This is totally on me. Let's see. Yeah. Yep. That's what happened. Okay. So you guys did read chapter 2, though, correct? You're prepared for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's do this then. We won't do notes for myself on chapter 2 because again I totally fucked that up. But what we will do is we'll have a conversation around chapter 2, and what I'll do, excuse me if I'm on my phone, I'll be going through kind of we did critical thinking questions. We'll try to work. All right. What we'll do is I will jump into fishbowl first, okay? And then that'll allow me to kind of take some notes on which you guys mentioned, and then from there I could give some clarification on if need be, and then we'll have an overall classroom conversation. And then obviously for next week I'm already prepared, so we know how we'll approach next week. And then we know to come discussing what I thought we would discuss today for next week. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I applaud you guys for being on point. This is me being disorganized. Shit happens when you got 4 classes at 2 different campuses. So,
Wait, you guys read up to chapter 2 or page 22?
let me so I can be specific. So let me put it this way: week 2 readings. The readings for week 2, and that says
Yeah.
chapter 1, section 1.3, pages 16 through 22. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that hasn't covered chapter 2.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, I read it. I have some notes here, so we could jump into it. I don't know why I thought we discussed this last week. I don't know. Anyway, it is what it is. So let's keep it moving. So with that being said, right, you all should have your journals for this reading for week 2. So you should be able to do a fishbowl. Okay. So what I'll do in my mind is we'll be in theory, right, a week behind in our lectures. So you guys are working on material for week 3, but we'll be lecturing on week 2. Next week, we'll be working on material for week 4, but we'll be lecturing on week 3. Okay. Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer for the fishbowl today? And Claudia, your hand is up from old, correct?
Could I try?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Give me 1 second. Let me just put appropriate notes. Got Jessica. And who else was that wanted to volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
Monet. Thank you, Monet. We got room for 1 to 2 more. Anyone want to volunteer? If not, I'll call on people at random. Okay, Joanna, thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. So, okay, Medine, thank you. Okay, so we have Jessica, Monet, Joanna, and is it Median? How do you pronounce that again? I'm sorry.
Madian?
Madian. Okay, thank you. All right. So again, think about typically, right? If this were to be done correctly, you would be able to pull from your fishbowl from your breakout room conversation. But I messed that up, so you cannot do that. But you can pull from your journals. You can read that verbatim if you so choose, or anything that stood out to you is perfectly fine as well. So whoever wants to start it off, it's on you.
I'll go first.
Okay.
In my breakout group, we did discuss our discussion questions for this reading, so we were able to bounce ideas off of each other. We basically spoke about the three commitments to the Black Studies movement, the three essential commitments: the cultural grounding, academic excellence, and social responsibility, along with, I didn't speak about it much, but I had done some outside reading of Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. And it only gave me like the last chapter of it, but I would take the last chapter because just from that last chapter, I felt like I really understood the obscene caricature. Like, what was this? What is the image of it, and how we can break away from that, and what is needed to do that? And it was really empowering, and it made me want to read the rest of it.
Yeah, it's a really profound text, Monet. Anytime you're talking
Yeah.
about like anti-colonial critical theory, Fanon is the place to start off with. For me, there's also A Dying Colonialism and Towards African Revolution are two very profound texts as well. And then, of course, Black Skin, White Mask. But yes, great call out. Thank you, Monet.
Uh,
Go ahead, Jessica.
so in our group, we kind of looked over the questions that you were talking about, and I just wanted to like about Sankofa and stuff. But if you want,
No, whatever both of you can talk about either or.
so about Sankofa, I kind of understand that concept because it directly like translates to return or to recover it, and I understand the principle behind it because I think if you look at the origin of things, you understand like where everything like stems from, because like everything builds off from that centerpiece. So Sankofa goes into the idea where you have to look truly into like the beginning of the history and culture to really understand the overall picture that's happening right now, you know. So that's what I gathered from that.
So it's a
Um,
perfect understanding and analysis of Sankofa. Joanna, did you want to go next?
Yeah. So I just wanted to emphasize on the five major objectives, basic objectives that the reading had. And it was quite interesting to me, and I really liked the second one. I know that the first one is said to be most important, but I believe the second one it's most important. And it kind of reminded me when it talks about the freeing and development of the mind. It reminded me, I don't know if you guys ever heard this story. It's from straight out from the Bible about Moses and taking the Israelites out of Egypt and how they were slaves for 400 years. So the teaching is not that the hard part for me, it was not taking them out of Egypt, but during when they were crossing, it took them 40 years to get to where they were going when it was supposed to take only 11 days. But it took that long because they were working on the fact that it was not the fact that they took them out of I'm sorry. They had to taking them out of Egypt was not the problem, but taking Egypt out of their mentality and their mind and changing that perspective that they were no longer slave was the challenging part. So for me, it was very important that to change that mindset of slavery.
So what Joanna just demonstrated, right? Because she said she read this in the text where. So let me first read you the second objective that she mentions. A second beginning objective of Black Studies was to assemble and create a body of knowledge which contributed to the intellectual and political emancipation. That is to say, a freeing and development of the mind, and then using that knowledge in the interests of Black and human freedom. Political emancipation as social goal was seen as dependent on intellectual emancipation as an academic goal, right? So to liberate the mind, right? And what Joanna was able to do was take a story that she read from the Bible that articulates Moses' need to liberate the ancient Africans who were enslaved by the Egyptians, right? Because we're not going to use the term slaves to refer to African people. So Moses needed to eliminate or remove that mentality that was instilled in them by this ancient Kemetic society, right? So I would liken that to, if we could use Fanon, and we'll talk about black skin, white mask, this idea of alienation that's created for those who experience what Du Bois calls double consciousness, right? So double consciousness, if we articulate that from a black experience, you understand yourself to be a black person, right? And you understand the culture and the dynamics of blackness, but you also understand that you're black operating in a white world, right? And it has its own set of particularities. So this creates this two realities that exist in one being that Du Bois calls double consciousness, right? And a part of that double consciousness in understanding the separation of the two worlds, or what Du Bois calls the veil that separates the two worlds, is an understanding that the white world, right, has positioned itself to be quote unquote superior, right? So that comes with its own set of particularities. Things like colorism, where the lighter you are, the more you beautiful you're expected to be, right? The texture of your hair, the more straighter that is, the more associated that is with beauty, right? So what I'm speaking to in those circumstances is a colonizing of the mind, right? Because now a standard of beauty has been associated with a European aesthetic, right? So just as Joanna is saying, Moses had to do the work of liberating the minds of the Egyptians from their Kemetic culture, right? Black folks in our time have to do the work of removing that little white man in our head that tells us that the light-skinned person looks better, right? Or I want to get a white wife so I can have mixed curly hair babies, right? So this is a product of this colonial thinking. So I say all of that to say what Joanna demonstrated for us is an analysis, right? So in your journal, you have to do a thesis, you have to do an analysis. Joanna demonstrated a perfect depiction of an analysis. She took something from the outside that she read within the Bible, and that helped her make sense of what she read with Karanga, right? So thank you, Joanna. We just got to kind of clean up that language a little bit and kind of remove that slave from our vocabulary. But that's part of that colonial thinking too, and it takes practice, right? Last but not least, Madeline.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the triple mission of Black Studies, specifically the last one that's mentioned within the textbook, like from page 26 to 27, social responsibility. As they define like the 5 overarching goals of Black Studies, the last 2, I feel like are concrete examples of the social responsibility one, where they state how a moral critique and social policy are and social policy correctness for social constraints, and also how there's a cultivation commitment to contribute to this. So like in summary, like they believe in like a social responsibility of all, not only to aid just one community, but like all of humanity. And there's just one line that stuck out to me that says, "Learning to serve and serving to learn are at the heart of this conception of education." And I just find that very powerful because I'm in a world where it's like me, or it places emphasis on we.
I want to stay right here because you bring up a very profound and fecund point, right? Give me one. I just want to write some things down.
Yeah.
And what you're touching on is the contradictions between individualism, right, as it's articulated through the understanding of what Black states are supposed to do and what education is supposed to do. So let me take a step back. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me put it to you this way. I think this will make more sense. Why are y'all going to school? What is your overall objective for going to school? Why are you doing that?
To get a
I'm sorry, what?
For a career?
To get a career. Okay.
To get a career.
Yep. So the majority of us approach this process of schooling to get a career, to get money, right? Because a job equals money, equals sustainability, equals a lifestyle, right? How much does this career focus have to do with the welfare of the people in your community? So, Karen, let me ask you this: if you had your druthers, if you had things to go exactly the way you would like, what career would you be in?
I don't know, like I'm really an indecisive person, but I chose psychology.
Psychology, okay.
'Cause,
Um,
yeah.
so I think so. So I think with the field that you choose is useful for how I'm about to go with this.
Okay.
How can you use psychology to benefit your community?
Well, psychology is like a lot about the mind. So it's like I'm not here to change anybody's mind either, but I do want to like make it seem like, oh, there's a different path to go. Like you don't have to go this way. Like you can change your mindset. Everybody has an option to change or not, but whether you want to, it has to come from you. It has to, like, nobody else can obligate you to do something you don't want to do.
Right. Okay. So psychology is a field that you can do the work to benefit and serve your community, right? Let's think about
Right.
another field, maybe like business, right? By and large, if you're going into business, not many people in business is looking to help their community, right? It's more so about the accumulation of wealth or accumulation of wealth for the corporation that you're working for, right? So again, this is a very individualistic culture that this system of schooling presents, right? What you do find, especially and with the so-called first generation students, which is typically made up of people of culture, they have a collective identity on why they're going to school, right? I'm doing this to show my brothers and my sisters that you can go to school, right? I'm doing this to make my abuela proud, right? I'm doing this because, my mom wasn't able to go to school. She always wanted to, so I'm picking up the torch that she left behind, right? So typically these students from culture have more of a collective notion of the work that schooling should do, right? Now, if we were to take this conversation and focus it in on Black Studies is speaking to this idea of social responsibility, right? So all the work that Black Studies is doing is with this idea and this notion, not just for the individual, right? Because one of our greatest intellectual minds out of our community, one could argue, is W.E.B. Du Bois, right? The first Black man to graduate from Harvard with a Ph.D., right? And he told ass, I could assure you the pleasure was yours, right? So he told him when he got his PhD. But Du Bois could have very well just said, yo, I got my PhD, I'm good, right? That's for the rest of y'all to figure out, because I did it. And then the power structure could be like, well, if Du Bois could do it, why can't you do it, right? But Du Bois was grounded in the work of Black Studies. And he knew that his success alone does nothing to change the conditions of all Black people, right? So he produced Black Studies work with the community in mind, okay? So how will your educational experiences look and feel different by placing your community in mind and at the forefront of what you're doing behind your education, just opposed to just focusing on yourself? How would that change your educational aspirations, right? If I can make it personal about myself, one of the reasons why I chose to be an educator is because it gives me access to young minds that need to be shaped and molded. More specifically, it gives me access to Black minds that need to be shaped and molded, right? That's why I'm teaching in Black Studies. So even coming into this, right, my forefront of my mind, my intention is for my community, right? Yes, I understood that there's a paycheck that comes with it, right? Yes, I understood that there's social mobility and there's some levels of prestige being in the academy, but that wasn't my initial focus, right? So I'm grounded and I'm steeped in this tradition that is Black Studies. So what I want you all to think about, and if you can, discuss how you can see your educational pursuits. And I know that you guys may be just starting your educational pursuit, right? Which is even better. But start thinking about how you could pursue this thing called education for the benefit of your community, right? how you could change the minds, change the material conditions, change the perceptions of your community, right? And here's the thing, you have the power to do so. I'm gonna say that again, just in case y'all missed it. You have the power to make those changes. Have you all heard of the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense? Anybody heard of them? Okay. Do you know how old the founders were when they started that movement? They were y'all age, 19 and 20. San Francisco City College is where the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense found its roots in the Bay Area, right? So it's not a question of age. Y'all the appropriate age, right? It's the question of, one, knowing the assignment and making the sacrifices to fulfill the assignment. But in this society, right, because again, Black studies is also grounded in critique. In this society, in this capitalistic society, which is a culture of individualism, you have been instructed, you have been socialized to pursue schooling to advance yourself. That's the contradiction. And if you were paying close attention, you understood how, or you picked up on how I use schooling in certain circumstances, and how I use education in other circumstances, right? Because there's a difference. Schooling is about you getting your job and getting that money and being individualistic, right? There's a reason why in your K through 12 experience, everyone is taught to stand in a line before you go into a classroom. There's a reason, there's a rationale before that. Because when they were cultivating this system, this form of pedagogy for K through 12, it was in the industrial age. And in the industrial age, you were working in the assembly line. So even as early as kindergarten, they're preparing you to be a worker, right? This is what schooling is intended to do. Follow instructions. It's not about critical thinking. It's not about solving problems. It's about regurgitating information. So your teacher is replaced by your manager, and the students are replaced by the workers. But the dynamics of the structure is exactly the same, right? So this is what this concept of schooling does, to advance the individual. Education, on the other hand, is about passing down cultural nuances, traditions, mores, folkways, right? Moreover, most importantly, education is about tapping into the divine in each and every one of you. Does everyone know what I mean when I say the divine? What is that? What do I mean when I say the divine? What's the divine? When I say the divine in each and every one of you, what am I referring to?
Your inner being.
The highest sense of self, right? That thing that places you closest to the Creator, right? That God in you is that divine, right? Say we are made in His likeness. That's that divine, that divinity. So that's what the work education is supposed to be doing, right? That's why we meditate before we start our class, because that opens up the portals to the divine, so we can have divine conversation and divine interactions, right? So how are you going to continue to pursue your education, not your schooling? Think about that for a moment and talk back to me. What do you think? I know it's a lot to take in this moment. I'll put y'all on the spot, but y'all brilliant. You can do it. Unique. What do you want to do with your education?
For me with education, I found that being able to not look at I found like focusing on not money, but focusing on what it is I can do within society, to not just be like, just think about myself in education, but like schooling, how you say it, I feel like education has actually turned it's turned from me, because I've fluctuated through finding out like being in a philosophical way is not, I'm not here to tell anybody how to run their lives, but I'm here to help guide them through what I've learned through experience and through what I've learned through going into higher education. Because if I limit myself, I limit those around me. And I want others to see, like, you can flourish without focusing on money. Like, yes, money is a basic necessity, but if you're chasing that paper, you're chasing something that's not for you. Like, chase what you're passionate about, and hopefully that trickle, like, it goes down to those who are watching you. Like how they say history has its eyes on you, is like literally eyes are watching you and how you're progressing in life and how you're either limiting yourself or advancing yourself through the purpose given to you.
So that's a lot to unpack. Unique, thank you. Monet, I know you've kind of already situated your career goal as being, you know, in K through 12 education. How could you distinguish education and schooling for yourself or even for your students?
I'm gonna start crying because I'm super passionate about it. I want to work so that no matter what area code a child wakes up in, no matter where they're from or where they're going, that they're able to get a quality education, that they're able to be given the same opportunities as those who wake up in the best neighborhoods or those that have the best teachers. And so with my education, I want to take, and what I've seen through my experience, I've seen kids who are homeless who have teachers on their backs because they're not well behaved. And it's like, yeah, dude, they're living in a van. It's like they don't have all the space in the world. That is my purpose from my education. And it's taken me a long time to get there, but I'm getting there.
For me, I'm attentive to the language used by both Monet and Unique, right? This purpose. I both said purpose. And I think y'all could feel it too by listening to Monet speak, right? There's a passion there. She's not just getting a paycheck, you know what I'm saying? And she articulated that through her purpose for education. But from what I'm observing and what I'm feeling, because literally listen to you, I got chills and goosebumps. That's your purpose for life. That's what you were put here on this planet to do. And that's why when you talk about these things, these emotions bubble up in you, right? Because that's a divine calling that you've been called to do. Not everybody can do that. I'm gonna be real with you. I have a divine calling to be an educator myself, but I can't do K through 12. I tried that shit. This just wasn't for me. I had to do it with the adults, right? So you have a very specified and unique calling, you know? And for me, it's heartwarming to hear how you approach that, because as someone with a 5-year-old, right, I would feel comfortable putting him in your class because you have the empathy to understand circumstances beyond schooling, right? Because schooling is going to make sure that that behavior is in order, that assignment is turned in. But education will be attentive to the fact that, yo, this kid been wearing the same clothes for 3 days. Right?
Yeah, or this kid hasn't had breakfast, or so yeah. Even with, I have a learning disability, and like I've been in and out the ringers, all of my parents, and it's just like to hear, we had a classmate who was talking about her child with a disability, and like I had to fight everything in me. It's like, girl, I have programs for you. I got people you can get in contact to, because it's like I have just been pushed to memorize. And when you were talking about the difference between schooling and education, it's like, I know for a fact I haven't been getting an education until now, because it's just like, you can force a monkey, you can force an animal to recognize and memorize numbers and letters, but we're not teaching students, we're not teaching kids for what they need in life to make it through the struggle, and to continue to give back to the communities, and to continue to look after their people. And it's like, it breaks my heart that it's just like this endless cycle.
So I typically kind of get into this conversation towards the end of the semester, but you know what? The spirit moved and it says we're gonna have this conversation now. So my homework for you all, right, for today, tomorrow, and forever is this. Think about your talents, think about your abilities, think about your gifts that you've been given, right? Think about the things that you're good at. Those are all hints that speak to your purpose, right? Because you don't just get those things from happenstance, right? There's certain things that you just are naturally good at, right? You just come out the womb being able to do, right? Think about that. Think about that real long and hard. And think about how you could use those gifts, talents, skills, and apply that to some type of work that will improve society, right? And I believe once you find that intersection, you found your purpose. You found your purpose. Start talking to your parents. Start seeing what some of the things that you were really good at or drawn to when you were young. Because typically you're more tapped into that purpose when you're younger, and then you get older, you get more socialized, you get disconnected, right? But think about your talents, your gifts, your skills, and think about how you could use those to improve those around you. And then you'll find your purpose. For Monet, for individuals like Monet who have already identified their purpose, your homework assignment for today, tomorrow, and forever is to live that purpose. Pursue that purpose with everything in you, with every fiber in your being, pursue that purpose. And I can say to you from experience, to echo Unique's perspective, the money will come. It won't be immediate, right? There will be hard times, right? But that's life. But the money will come. And when the money comes, you'll be a lot more fulfilled because you weren't just chasing the happiness or the false happiness that comes with money, right? You already know who you are. You already know the work you're supposed to do. The money will just be a benefit to allow you to do the work more effectively, right? So that's my homework for you for today, tomorrow, and forever. And we'll revisit this conversation at the end of the semester to see how your homework is going, okay? I didn't mean to get into all this, but this is kind of how things go. And everything happens for a reason. That's probably why I prepared the wrong week's reading so we could have this specified conversation that we're having right now. But if you want, we can let's jump back into the reading material. Is there anyone that has any questions about what they've read or anything that seemed unclear that you would like me to further crystallize for you?
I'm a little confused.
Okay.
I don't know if so last week it said on the critical thinking questions just to pick a question, but then the previous week said to utilize the 4 components and also to put your questions down. So was I supposed to do that for the critical thinking questions week also?
Okay, so you're a little bit different, Laura Ann, because you're registered in the strictly online class, correct?
Right, yeah.
So the way that course is structured, 1 week you have your discussion questions. And so what you could do, and what I was trying to articulate, I may not have wrote that clearly, is you know how in your journal you have the 4 components, right? The thesis, the analysis, the contemporary analysis, and the question, right? What I was trying to say is you could use that question that you have in your journal and just post that in the discussion questions. And then you've done that assignment. And then you just respond to two other posts from your classmates. So that's for 1 week, right? And then the next week, your critical thinking questions. So for the critical thinking questions, I post 2 questions and you just choose one to answer. And for your class, it'll be every other week. So 1 week will be discussion question, 1 week will be critical thinking question. Next week will
That's what I thought. Okay, because I was confused with my class. They were telling me you have to do the 4 components and the critical thinking and the questions. I'm like, that's a lot.
That's every other week. So
that's what I was trying to explain.
Yeah, every week you have to do a journal. So you have to do that journal every week. But
thank God. I was like,
yeah, that's too much work. I wouldn't do that to y'all. That's ridiculous.
I was like, I was gonna die.
Yeah, no, that's way too much.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the reading material?
This is a quick question just about so for last week we had to do the questions. Do we turn anything for this week?
I believe this week was it's due on Friday, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's a discussion board question. That's what it said on.
And then also, I did mention with your group, with this class, the discussion questions where you could do them. They're optional, right? Because again, when I structured this, it was for an online class, and the online classes don't have the chance to come together and have these conversations. So the discussion questions supplement that. So have the discussion questions assigned for Friday, but I'm not going to knock you if you don't do them. Those are optional, right? Because we're having these conversations here in person. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think probably by like week 4, this will be a little bit more fluid. And I'm kind of, we're going to just fix it as it goes. You know what I mean? It will stay fluid with it. Any other questions about the material, about the reading? Or anything else?
So there's nothing due, right? There's nothing due this week?
No, you could just,
Not
if you so
technically,
choose,
okay.
you could add to those discussion questions.
Okay.
If you want to, it's optional. Let me see something, because I have notes for the reading.
Oh, wait, so the critical thinking question we submit to the assignment that you posted.
Yeah, you'll submit that via Canvas to the assignment right there. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
What do you guys think about the importance and the emphasis placed on this idea of an activist intellectual, right? I mentioned some historical figures. The name Frantz Fanon came up, right? The name W.E.B. Du Bois came up. So both of those individuals were not only scholars, right? They produce enormous volumes of work in text, right? If we're talking about Frantz Fanon, within his lifespan, he produced 4 books and a play, along with several articles and essays, right? That's the intellectual work that he did. But on the activist side of his work, he was an organizer, a rebel, and a revolutionary with the Algerian Liberation Front, right? So, little background on Fanon: he is born in Martinique, which is a French colony, right? He gets trained in the metropole, and then he goes to France to receive his Ph.D. In psychology, right? And he's working for the French government as a clinical psychologist, and he's doing the work of psychoanalyzing the colonized Algerian people, right? But through that work, he realizes the oppression that is being placed on the Algerian people and how their colonial state is the same as his colonial state and the colonial state of his people from Martinique. And he defects and starts to organize for the Algerian Liberation Front, right? It starts to be a revolutionary for Algeria. So this is Frantz Fanon, right? W.E.B. Du Bois, I already mentioned, the first black man to graduate from a PhD from Harvard, right? Authors of The Souls of Black Folks, Black Reconstruction, The Philadelphia Negro. I could go on and on and on, right? Probably one of the most well-versed and well-published thinkers, period, right? Not just black, but period, right? The father of sociology, the father of American sociology. So when you talk about sociology, you're talking about Durkheim, you're talking about Weber, you're talking about Marx, right? W.E.B. Du Bois went to school with all of them. They were his classmates. He was the first one to come back from Germany and begin doing sociological work in the United States with the Philadelphia Negro, right? So this is what he's done as an intellectual, okay? But as an activist, he founded the Niagara movement, right? He organized one of the first Pan-African Congresses in 1901, right? He's one of the founders of the NAACP, right? So this concept and this notion of being an activist and a scholar is central to Black studies. I mentioned Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, the founders of the Black Panther Party. What they do not give Huey P. Newton credit for is he's a doctor. It's Dr. Huey P. Newton. He received his PhD from Santa Cruz, I believe it is. A phenomenal dissertation that he wrote on the oppression of the American government, right? So again, scholar and intellectual. I'm in here in front of you all doing intellectual work. But in the summer, I do rites of passage with kids from 10 to 17 years old in San Bernardino, right? That's my activist work. So what I'm asking you, why do you think there's importance placed on this idea of being an activist and an intellectual?
Unique here. I believe like being an intellectual, yeah, you have the knowledge, but when it comes to experience and giving back in an activist way, it's, yeah, I'm an intellectual and I'm like, not to be a know-it-all and like how people say, oh, you're just a know-it-all. But no, I know it and I want to give it back. So I'm going to go out and or who lack that access, like how you say your rites of passage or giving back to your children, giving back in an activist way of fighting the fight through giving knowledge to those who may not know how to seek it. Because knowledge is something that you learn through education, like your educational journey. It's not just, I memorized this and I'm gonna just give you back what I memorized. It's no, I'm gonna sit with what I've learned and I'm going to seek out and give back in an activist point of view of fighting against that has oppressed many of us, and clarify that up in a way where people feel like they matter. Like I have this saying, like, you matter with capital letters, because we've been taught like I don't matter in this society, but actually I do, because I mean there must be a reason why I'm still here, or I was brought into this world type thing.
Absolutely. Well said. Anyone else want to speak to the importance of activism? And, go ahead, Joanna.
I wanted to bring up the idea of like intellectualism and activism. I think it's because like I think it's important because a lot of people put value over like people who are smart over like the average person. Like the average person might have all the facts correct, but a lot of people are just gonna ignore them because like, oh, you know, they don't have these credentials, you know, they have no right to speak about it. It's like that girl, like Greta Thunberg, like just because she's like young, like a lot of people ignore her, even though like a lot of the things she says is like fair and accurate, you know. But it's because like, you know, like a lot of people are just gonna like push that away. So I think putting having like becoming an intellectual to combat this and proving that you know it does change minds in some way. Those who are really stubborn.
Thank you, Jessica. Joanna, you have your hand up, and then Monet.
Yeah, I think mainly is being an intellectual, you're kind of doing it for yourself. You know, you go to school, you get an education, and in some way, that's what this society has portrayed as the American dream. Because, for example, a lot of people from my country that come here, they're very excited to escape poverty from over there, you know, the American dream, but no one's really thinking about, to be honest, no one's really thinking about being an activist. But in reality, I admire this type of people because it takes sacrifice. It takes sacrifice, it takes courage. It's something, like you said, it's something divine, you know, to give back to your community, to do something that we're gonna be talking years and years from now. So I think it's very unique.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Kayla, you have your hand up?
Yeah. For me, when I think about intellectual versus activism, like intellectual is more about like knowing the facts of certain topics or whatever topic you're going. It's more factual. You got the information down, and then you just teach it straight facts. Whereas activism, it's more on a personal level. You know, it's easier like teaching people. Like people, I feel like will tend to listen to you more because it's like you've been there, you've lived it or experienced it, and so it's like more interesting and it grabs more people's attention because it's like, oh, especially if it's something other people are interested in, it helps them better understand it, especially like if it's a career or any type of thing. It's better or more interesting learning through somebody else's personal experiences, whereas you're just in a structured intellectual learning environment. That's how I took it.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. Absolutely. I heard a man's voice. Was somebody else going to say something? Claudia, go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Claudia. Let's give Baba Pierre a chance real quick, and then we'll go to Claudia.
I think that an intellectual must be like a general in the ancient armies. The general elaborates the strategies, and he was at the head of the army. The intellectual, he thinks, he search ideas, he teach strategies, and he leads the battle. That is the role of the perfect intellectual.
And then before you jump to Claudia, when we get into next week's readings, you'll see what Baba Pierre is talking about. You see that articulated in some of the figures that Karenga dives into. So we'll circle back to Baba Pierre's conversation in our next week's lecture, because he's spot on. Like, he's absolutely correct. Claudia, you're up next.
Yeah, I was just gonna elaborate really quick. How intellectuals, it's more just like accrued knowledge, and then the activists kind of apply that. They're kind of like the thinkers versus the doers that try to like spread that knowledge actively.
So we're coming towards the end. I just want to kind of encapsulate or wrap up a lot of what I was hearing in this conversation around activism and intellectualism. One thing, right, just as an overall broad intellectual practice, right, is generative, it's helpful, it's instructive to get yourself to start thinking not in terms of binaries or dichotomies, okay? Another way to say that, don't focus on or, but start thinking about and. So if we're talking about activism and intellectual, it's not about being an activist or an intellectual, but start playing with the idea of being an activist and an intellectual, right? It's not the idea of manhood and masculinity or womanism and feminism, right? But how can these two seemingly separate theories begin to be brought together and see what can, be produced from that standpoint, right? So just as an intellectual practice, because we've been trained and we've been socialized to think in binaries, right? A and B, black and white, right? Start thinking about how these two things can be brought together and what can be produced with this merging, right? It's this idea or this notion of Creolization, right? Creole, the culture of Creole is a bunch of different cultures being mixed up and brought together to produce one culture, right? So just start trying to train your mind to think in that way. Also, what I've heard, and I think is unique, who was talking about this. Actually, a couple of you mentioned this, and I believe it's Kayla also. But it's part of bridging the gap between high intellectual theory and those who don't have access to that high intellectual theory, right? That's what made the Black Panther so popular. Is they took the words of Marx, they took the words of Ho Chi Minh, and they put it in street language. So the average pimp, the average hustler, the average gangster knew exactly what they was talking about, right? That's being able to merge activism and intellectualism, right? Another thing is this notion of theory and practice, right? So theory could be understood through intellectualism, right? Practice could be understood through activism, right? But I'm trying to get you to think not or, but and. So there's this thing called praxis, is when you take your theory and you put it into action, right? And that's the work of the activist intellectual. That's the work of Black studies, right? Is being able to take these high theories and put them into a practice that advances and empowers your community. And when you leave this class, you should be able to theorize your practice. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying by that? Your ability to theorize, to think about what your practice or what your activism should look and feel like, right? So we are at 12:26. Baba Pierre, are you okay with us ending class now?
Please?
Please. Okay, so that means hell yeah, let's go.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead, Bob. Go ahead, Bobby. Here, I'm listening.
I have concerns. So if I have understood, there is no assignment due to next Friday.
Right.
There is no assignment.
Correct.
Due to next Friday.
Correct. So it would be February 4th would be your next due date for an assignment.
Okay. So the second thing, I have just noticed that journal will be done before the course. And this journal will be used in the fishbowl.
Yes.
Next question, as the journal will be submitted at midterm.
Yes.
At that time,
yes,
I should have written 6 or 7 journals.
That seems about.
Shall I submit them together or separately?
Together. Try to submit them as one file. So you have like one document with all of your journal entries.
What is approximately the length of each journal, the number of words of each journal?
That's totally up to you, Baba Pierre. You could do, I don't have a word count. Long as you touch those 4 components, long as you talk about what the thesis is, what your analysis is, what your critical analysis is, and any questions you have. Long as you have those 4 things, you're okay. It could be 4 words, it could be 400 words. It's totally up to you.
Okay. Last concern, what do the student shall do with his journal during the fishbowl?
Good question. So you can literally read your journal for the fishbowl, right? You can say, you know what, I want a fishbowl, and I'm like, all right, bet, it's your turn. And you can just literally read your journal verbatim, and that's a perfectly fine fishbowl.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All
right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. You're absolutely welcome. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns? And I like this format with Baba Pierre closing out because he asked some really good ass questions at the end of the course. I'm sure a lot of y'all had them same questions. He just allows us to really get to the bottom of that. So this works very well. So we will reconvene next week and we'll be going over the materials for week 3 that you'll be posting on the following Friday. If you so choose to submit discussion questions, that's great. I'll be reading through those and responding. If not, no big deal. We'll touch back base on Tuesday for another discussion. If you're in the online only group, I appreciate your attendance. I'll start grading your work probably today or tomorrow. So just kind of be patient with me on that. For everyone, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Stay vigilant, y'all. This thing is still running rampant. Stay on your water, stay on your exercise, stay on your vitamin D. Be healthy, be wealthy, be wise. I appreciate y'all. See you next week. Peace. Evangelina, did you have a question?
Okay.
You good? Baba Pierre, you okay?
Okay.
Okay. How you feel about the meditation?
Yes. It was good.
Okay, good. I know you had asked about it. I just want to check back in with you.
It was good.
Okay, and if you need me to change anything about Pierre, don't hesitate to let me know, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next week.
Next week, sir.
Next week.
Next week.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.